I had just enough life experience of I don't care what you think and you can't touch me, that I'm like, I'll hold this possibility. What's the worst thing that's going to happen? You're going to fire me? The world is like these artificial deadlines. That is the best, most articulate way I've ever heard it. The number one secret is being aligned and passionate about what you do and realizing that no one's coming to change the game for you.
Welcome to Biz Bites, brought to you by Com Together, helping businesses like yours build their brand through telling amazing stories to engage and grow audiences on multiple platforms. There's a lot you can say about my guest, George Bryant, and there's plenty that's been said, but let me just start by saying he's just George. And we've been having a little bit of a chat before we've kickstarted, and I can say that he is just George. But the resume is vast, and we'll get to that in a second. But firstly, George, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me. I'm beyond honored to be here. So it's truly a pleasure. It's truly a pleasure.
Well, I definitely can guarantee our audience that the pleasure is going to be all of ours. I want to start very quickly with the resume because it's not really about the resume, but I think it's important to give people that context. And rather than me rattling it off, and I know you can rattle it off, what I'm intrigued about with the resume is what's at the top of the list?
Yeah, well, so for me, the top of the list is being the best father in the world, but the one that will get everybody to listen to me. And by the way, everybody, that's the only reason I'm listing it, so you pay attention, and then I'll throw it in the trash in a minute. The number one for me personally would be 2 years after teaching myself how to cook. I was a 22-week New York Times bestselling author of a cookbook. And then 6 months later, somebody asked me to make an app, and I was like, I can do that. And I ended up having the number one health app of 2015 featured by Apple. And then on the client side, I had a supplement company doing $1 million a month, and 18 months after my work, they had a $2 million day. And so I've never spent paid media in my own brand. When I did that cookbook, I only had 6,000 people in my audience. And when I had the app hit number one in the world organically, I only had 11,000 people on my email list. And then with the companies I scaled, I did them without paid media. I did it all through customer retention, customer journey. And so then there's probably 3 more companies that have passed the $1 billion mark now. There's probably over 100 that are in the 8 and 9 figures. And I tell everybody the true secrets come from relationships, because scale comes from retention, not acquisition. And so those are some of the highlights that tend to get people's attention. And then somehow magically, professional sports teams have hired me, some of the biggest companies in the world, and I am just a tattooed guy with a mohawk that didn't go to college and barely made it through high school, that served in the Marine Corps for 13 years, that just pretends he belongs in the room and teaches people how to love their people. And so those are the things I'm like really proud of that tend to get people's ears to perk up.
It's quite a resume. And I'd been thinking a little bit about how I was going to introduce you. And, there's the reading of the list yourself. There's all sorts of things, and then I was trying to think. Well, is there a quick summary of you? And do I say business relationship guru? Is that the word? I thought about it's really about harnessing relationships. Is all part of it, but I think it's also part in introducing you. It's really about the fact that it's your experiences as well that has truly made you, because you've had the highs and the real lows. And that allows you to be where you are today, isn't it?
It 100%. Like I'm successful because I'm stupid. I said this one on the call, right? Like I didn't set out to be an entrepreneur. I didn't even know entrepreneurship existed when I became a food blogger, and then I became a consultant accidentally. But I think my true value comes from growing up with a lack of everything, a lack of love, a lack of family, a lack of support, being homeless, and then spending 13 years of my life in war and in what I would describe as hell. And it's always kept this thing on my heart that I always wanted to give to people what I never had. But somehow in business, 30 years ago, we stopped doing it for the right reasons. And I was like, I'm going to die on this hill, and I'm bringing it back, because people are the only thing that matters. Like, Our bank account balance isn't going to be on our headstone. How many products you sold isn't going to make any more people show up to your funeral by squeezing out profit and treating people like crap. And like, I think what's missing in the world is heart and connection and empathy and compassion and like true abundance. Like, there's enough to go around. Like, it's just competition over collaboration. And I think that I had just enough life experience of I don't care what you think and you can't touch me, that I'm like, I'll hold this possibility. What's the worst thing that's going to happen? You're going to fire me? And what's the best thing that happens? That we treat people like people, and as a byproduct, both sides win. And I was crazy enough for long enough, and trust me, people have told me I'm crazy my whole career, and they're like, you're full of crap, this will never work, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, until it does. Until it does. And I've had enough life experience that, like, what, you're going to kick me out of a boardroom? I'm like, have you ever had to poop out of the side of a truck in the middle of a firefight? Like, no, great. Like, your words don't really matter to me. And I'm like, oh, great, you're not going to pay me? Great, I'm going to go home and find somebody else. Like, I just don't care at that level. And so because of that, it's allowed me to pursue a lot of things. But on the other side, on the opposing end of that coin is, I've probably made every mistake you can make, and I've probably lost more money than anybody could ever imagine. And the more I lost it, the more unattached I became to it, which allowed me to stay focused on what mattered in the first place. And then magically it reappears. And so it's been this, this mesh pool of experience. And then because of my confidence, and my confidence doesn't come from knowing that everything I do will work. My confidence comes from knowing that I won't stop until it does, no matter how much you pay me, right? And so with that, it got me into some rooms and into some places I didn't belong. Like, my first job as a consultant was a $1 billion company who handed me a $20 million a month ad budget. And I'm like, I'll figure it out. And so when I played Monopoly with their money, I cared about it more than it was my own, because I didn't want to affect anybody's life or take money out of their pocket. And I was like, I would convince myself the mafia was going to put a hit on me if I lost it. And so I just learned, and I feel like a lot of my life in the Marine Corps just helped me stay, we call it PUP, having peace under pressure. And just knowing that no matter what constraint exists around me, as long as I stay aligned and level-headed and clear on the outcome, it's really just a matter of time until you figure it out. And that's what entrepreneurship is, right? It's you only lose when you quit. But for every highlight reel that you see, there's 175 failures, and we just managed to stand up one more time. But every time you stand up, you know not to stand there again or step there again or turn your face when that next swing comes in. And I think the more experience you have, the faster you figure out the game.
I love that. And you made me, while you were talking, suddenly had this flashback of when I was younger. And I really wish I could remember who the author was of this, but there was a short poem that I learnt when I was younger. Don't be jealous of the wealthy man. Remember this, please do. In years to come, the wealthy man will be just as dead as you.
That is such a good poem. That is such a good poem. And you know what's so funny is, like, the reason I have this perspective is I had some incredible leaders in the Marine Corps. I also had some horrible leaders in the Marine Corps. But I'll never forget, I met a general like that, they're like, oh, you can't talk to him. And I was like, and he looked me dead in the eye one day and he's like, bro, let's have a cup of coffee. We both put our pants on the same in the morning. I just been in this game a whole lot longer. And like, he just installed this thing into me. Like, at the end of the day, we're all humans, right? No matter what experience we have, what job we have, how much money we make. And I think the only time people lose is when you believe either side of the coin, that we're any different, any better, or there's a wedge between any of us based on the labels that the world creates, because you nailed it, right? And depending on what you believe in, like, I'm a man of faith, I'm a man of God, but depending on what you believe in, you either get cremated or buried 6 feet under, or God forbid some wild animal eats you and you disappear. But no matter what, we all end up in the same place. Not here anymore. Not here anymore. And I think that perspective is lost on a lot of people. And I also think it's a big trap in entrepreneurship, because I watch hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of entrepreneurs sacrifice their time thinking that they're going to get it back in the end, when they just piss it all away and never get to enjoy it in the first place, when enjoying it is one of the secrets to success.
I absolutely agree with you. And it's funny because I think a lot of people discovered some of that during COVID and all of the lockdowns. And
Yes.
I've been fortunate enough that I've been, in this business for 13 years, but I've probably been working from home for about 14 or 15 years. And so when COVID came, it didn't change anything as far as that was concerned. But the thing about working from home, I mean, my kids are now older, but it's wonderful to still be able to be here for them. That I'm not in an office somewhere. They're actually, a few feet away from me. Luckily enough for them, at the time we're recording this, they're fast asleep because they like to sleep in. But it's such an amazing thing to be able to still have that around you and to not lose sight of that. And and they keep me in my place as well. There are times when you think, oh, just do a little bit more work, and they're going, Dad, dinner. Let's watch TV. Let's do something else.
Oh yeah. The best Parkinson's law come from our kids. They hold us accountable. But what's so funny is like it inspired a thought in me because this question comes up a lot. Like I've coached every range of entrepreneur you can imagine, from I'm just starting to billionaires. Like they're all my clients, and I don't know why, because I felt very unqualified. I'm like, I don't have $1 billion in the bank. And one of my clients looked me dead in the eye, and he's like, name me an Olympic athlete. And I could name a few, and he's like, name me one without a coach. And I'm like, I can't. And he's like, name me one of the coaches that has a gold medal. And I'm like, I can't. And he's like, exactly. So you're qualified. I'm like, thank you for shifting my perspective. But the number one thing when I ask people, I'm like, why do you want to scale? Like, what do you want? And they're like, I want more time. I'm like, great. And I'll be like, give me your phone. And they're like, okay. And I'm like, great. You can have it back in 7 days. And they don't know what to do with it.
Mm.
And I'm like, but you have the time now. And I realize that we live in a world now where people pick up these stories that they're either taught or caught that aren't theirs. And it creates these agendas and these paths that they end up following that sacrifice their soul in the process, when in actuality, you could have a lot of what you wanted now, but we end up working or chasing things that even if when we have them, we can't recognize them, nor do we really want to extract them. And for me, I learned that in experiencing so much loss and death and seeing people die in front of me and getting blown up and getting shot and being close. Like, I should be dead, 17 times over by now, but God decided to make me the Terry Tate for the evil in the world and keep me here because he makes me pretty unkillable at this point. And it's a really big perspective, but like I spent my 21st birthday in the middle of Sudan, Africa, in a genocidal country in war. And the perspective is huge, and it's never allowed me to lose sight of like what truly, truly matters. And I'm the same as you. Like, my daughter's 19 and my son is 7, and I could probably have hundreds of millions of dollars in the bank, except I don't want it. I will never get this time back with my kids. Like, when my 7-year-old comes running in this door in 30 minutes, the computer goes off and it doesn't go on for another 3 days because it's his weekend.
Yep.
And I'm sure there's a lot of opportunity in there, and I'm sure there's a lot of business in there that I'm not going to do. And I'm sure it might be great for somebody, but for me, you get this better than anybody. Like, I'm never going to get that time back, and I don't ever want it to be that way. And I missed a lot of his years younger. Like, when I was at the height of my consulting career, I was flying 150 times a year. And I missed his first steps, and I'm going to cry. I missed his, first words, even though they were daddy. Like, I was on an airplane. I was in a hotel. And I'm like, yeah, those lessons were learned. Like, it was never worth it. And I find that most people don't have a deep enough connection to what they really want and what truly matters. And what's so funny is I thought I would never replace the revenue, but speaking to the kids, we will fill whatever container we create, which is Parkinson's law. And so my work week is 4 days now, and it's normally like 6 hours a day. But I actually produce more in that time now than I did when I worked 7 days, because it forces me to think creatively and focus on outcomes instead of thinking I have unlimited amount of time. And it's actually one of the big secrets. And so I feel the same way. I just moved my office back into my house. Like, my kids was over there, and I had a separate building for 3 years, and I was like, no. And I would just sit over there. I'm like, oh, I'll do something else. And I was like, now I'm here. And he's like, I tell him I'm doing a podcast for an hour. He whips out his stopwatch, and at the hour mark, his head peeks around the corner. He's like, hey, Dad, boom. And I'm like, oh, you're totally right. And it changes the perspective.
It does. It's and it's such an important lesson, and that whole idea of time and everything. And it's fascinating to me because I love when you're talking about the fact that you're only doing 4-day weeks. I've taken off days for religious holidays, and you don't miss things. You tell people, and they're fine. They're there when they come back. We live in a world of artificial deadlines. It's
Oh, that is so good.
It's so often that happens, isn't it? It's like, I mean, the worst is sort of Christmas time, and particularly in Australia where we then hit a sort of a 6-week holiday, so everyone shuts down, and there's this magic that you've got to get it done before like the 20th of December. And I'm like, why? What difference does it make to you if it would come out on the 1st of February? Would it really change the world for you? And more often than not, no. Yep. They've just put this deadline in place, and it doesn't have a real anchor. It's occasionally if there's a conference that can't be shifted, okay. But even then, I've heard of conferences that have shifted if the speaker's not available.
People underestimate their power. But here's the thing, like we've taken these concepts and the internet has destroyed them. Like, you got to be available. I'm like, hey, you do realize that people ran $100 million businesses before there were cell phones, right? Where they were faxing and they were doing hand mail and nothing was an urgency. And do you remember like when you had a house phone like I do? And I wasn't picking that thing up after hours, nor were you calling me in my dinner time. And we didn't even have answering machines, and magically it worked. And like, it's so funny because I don't have a voice because I just got back from a men's event that I went to personally for me. And they took our phones on day one, and I'm like, you can keep it. I don't need it back. And they had it for 4 days, and I was like, yeah, I love that I do this all the time. And magically, no one died. No buildings burnt down. Like, everybody was fine, and everything that they thought was urgent and an emergency was handled. And I was like, do you still need me? They're like, nah, I figured it out. I'm like, great, right? Because there's no chance of success if you ever sacrifice yourself or your values in the process. And I think that that's the biggest part, is you nailed it. Like the artificial deadlines are the killers of people's souls and hearts, because it takes away every ounce of life that you could live. And then if you even want to go into it scientifically, when a human being's distracted, it takes 22 minutes to get back on task. So if you're being present with your family and you check your phone and you're in the middle of a game, it takes 22 minutes for you to get back to the level of presence that you were with your family before you checked your phone. And now you do it every time there's a moment of silence and you wonder why you're unhappy and they don't feel your presence. Like, these things are supposed to be tools to take over the world, not tools to control your entire life, right? Like, the difference is how you use it.
100%.
And like, I actually have two numbers on my phone. I have a business line and a personal line. And on Thursday, I do this magical thing where the business line gets turned off until Monday. And like, when I take a vacation, like, off. And when I turn it back on, do you know what's there? Just an unlimited to-do list that I can choose to attack if I'd like to. And most of the time I don't. But it really comes down to us. And that is a quotable. You better clip that part out of the show. The world is like these artificial deadlines. That is the best, most articulate way I've ever heard it put. And I saw somebody do a post this morning. They're like, hey, do you know airplane mode isn't just for your phone? You can do it in your whole life too. And I'm like, dude, that is so good.
It's amazing when you get that practice of switching it off. I do that as well. And there's Friday by 4:30, 5 o'clock. Phone goes off, doesn't go on until at least Saturday night. And even then, by then I know that nobody's hassling me and everyone knows that I'm offline. And you know what? When you train the people that you're not available, you're not available. And they wait. They wait till you come back. If it's really important, they'll be there. If it's not that important, it's not that important.
This is why I love Mike Michalowicz too. Like, in his book Clockwork, I love him because when you get into it and Profit First, he forces you to schedule a 6-week vacation, like a no contact, get out, don't touch it, because you don't have a business if you can't do that. But to even deepen the undertone of this is like, The whole reason we're entrepreneurs or that we're in business or we live these lives is to create resources to be able to enjoy them. But you can't enjoy them if you never unplug from them and you become a slave to them. Like you end up just becoming a byproduct of the entire ecosystem, and then your identity gets wrapped up into it, and then your emotions get wrapped up into it, and then all of a sudden you're a quarterback and you're like, oh, I fumbled, I'll never play football again. I'm like, you're guaranteed to fumble, but only when you take it personally do you lose the game. And so the amount of depth and wisdom that's baked into like what you just said is like transformational for people at a level that I don't think most people understand.
And the interesting thing about it is the concept is thousands of years old, right? It predates phones by some margin, but that whole idea of switching off and having family time is as old as time. But
Yep.
it's so often completely ignored. And it sort of leads me to something. I ran a forum a couple of days ago, and a whole lot of business leaders in there. And I asked them, if you could put it into a couple of words, what is the sentiment out there at the moment? And there were two phrases that came up. One was cautiously strategic, and the other was overwhelm. And the interesting thing about the overwhelm is that it's because there's so much going on, and this is business leaders who are overwhelmed by, movements on interest rates, cash flow problems, people problems. AI was a big one. Not knowing where to go, what to do. Is it new work? Is it? Do I need it? Everything that's changing, and it's freezing people and it's locking them up. And then you combine that with that sense of, I need to keep doing more. I need to work longer and do more stuff. It's how do you teach people to, because it's easy to say stop, but how do you actually teach people to stop?
The truth is that most people need evidence in their own life to feel it, right? Like we can't change anybody, but we can paint pictures. But like I had to learn everything through painful experiences until I had enough of them that it really, really like landed for me. But, perspective is a big part of this. Like we think about it now with AI. I can go back to 2009 when the real estate crash happened in the United States. I can go back to 2000 when the social media came out. I can go back to 2008 when paid ads came out. There's always been a thing. There's always a thing that everybody's afraid they're going to fall behind. And I think the biggest mistake is people try to build visions over decades, but they measure in days. And all you end up doing is being reactive and getting in the way of all the results. And then number two is one of my dear friends, Alex Sharfin, who's such an incredible entrepreneur. And he's built a couple $500 million businesses. But one of his quotes that I love is, you don't have the business or results you want because you haven't become the person to get them yet. Right. And really, the key to success in life is perspective, right? It's the difference between your prison and power. But the finish line is being a triage nurse, not on the field, because everything around us changes, but we can't allow it to change us. All we do is take in what's around us and make the most informed decision we can and move things bite by bite as priorities change, right? And so no matter what comes down to it, it's always about mastering self, right? Like if your nervous system's getting lit up in business, you've already lost because you're having an emotional reaction that's going to get in the way of any decision, right? And so it's really a game of looking in the mirror and figuring it out. And when we think about experience, the only thing experience teaches you is how to be calm under pressure, have peace under pressure, because you're like, oh, felt that before, did that before, yep, seen that one before, oh, here's a new one, here's another fear tactic, here's another new thing. But all too often we become a victim to that pressure, and then all it does is cloud our vision, right? It just changes our reticular activating system to put blinders on to only see more of that pain. And you can't get out of the pill bottle from the inside. Like you have to have a perspective change, but it's always just perspective. And the unfortunate thing is, like, to even speak to what you said earlier, this isn't anything new. It's coming back into your body. It's disconnecting from the environment that you're in and changing your perspective. It's going to take a breath and having a state change. It's going to do something fun to unlock a creative idea. right? Like I'll never forget, I was in a company last year, one of our companies, and we scaled the company from 8 million to 106 million in 2 years. And we manufactured the products. But there was one day we got a phone call and we needed $30 million in 2 days to stay afloat. And so we had all the people in the company were in the office. There were like 45 of us. And we're sitting in the fishbowl, like the C-suite office, all of us, decision makers, and everybody out in the floor is having a panic attack. I'm going to lose my job. I'm going to do blank. I'm going to do blank. And they're all looking at us. And what are we going to do? So we walk out of the office and we're like, all right, everybody, we're done with work for the day. We're going to play. We put the boats in the water. We went out to the park and we spent the next 6 hours playing. And everyone's like, what are we doing? We're like, exactly what we're supposed to do. Nothing's going to change the next hour or 2 or 5. It'll change when we decide. And then magically, everybody went out to play. They released their emotions. While we were surfing behind the boat, we were laughing about all of it. And then one of my buddies is like, wait, I can call my buddy I haven't talked to in a few years. Let me see what he says. We pick up the phone. He's like, oh, I'll wire it to you tomorrow. What do you need? When we're triggered, when we're overwhelmed, when we're in a stress-based state, our body and nervous system just looks for more overwhelm. But because we state changed and we went and released it and we cleared it, all of a sudden all these magical ideas showed up that we just couldn't see before, that were always there, that we had access to, right? And it's really just perspective. And so I really think it boils down, and people's success boils down to number one, being self-aware, but not making it wrong. It's okay to be upset. It's okay to feel stress. Like when I lose big deals, when crazy things happen, when our cash flow gets down, I'm like, and I was like, but if I make a decision from that state, I'm guaranteed to bring more of that pain. And so it's really having the awareness to unplug and to not believe the stories that everybody else tells me I want to believe. And then magically, when I give myself that space, when I allow myself to fully feel my feelings, or take a breath, or pick up the phone and call somebody and get it out of the cesspool of my head, and that other perspective comes in, magically solutions start appearing. But it really comes down to one's ability to be aware of what's happening in our body, what's happening in our thought process, and not making it wrong. That's the biggest part, right? Because no matter what, you still have to win the game. You still have to figure out the next solution. And if you ever drafted a player for your soccer team or football team and you paid them $100 million, would you beat them up before they got on the field and be like, you're a failure, you're going to miss the shot, you'll never make it, and expect them to win? No. You'd pull them aside and be like, hey, let's go get some ice cream. Let's go have some chocolate chip pancakes. Let's get out of here for a minute. Let's figure it out. Let's reset your brain. All right, what are we going to do and how can we do it differently? And it really just boils down to that practice and that muscle. But I feel like with the world that we live in now, especially after COVID, it's created this massive overwhelm and instant gratification. And I want it now and I need it instantly. And all too often we end up missing the big picture, and we create permanent undesirable results based on temporary feelings because we just won't give it space. And so I think the solution is to slow down, to ask better questions, to get different perspectives, and don't expect everything to be fixed overnight.
I was trying to work out how I describe the business community at the moment when I was in that forum. And it came to me afterwards that it's like the business world has ADD at the moment. That
Yes.
Our attention span has become so short, and we're so fixated on, why didn't I get enough people looking at my post? How many of this and how many of that? And we just don't have that perspective anymore. And you worry about the next generation because they're fixated on that. They've grown up with that. We at least, remember a time when that wasn't the case. But it's a really difficult one to combat. And and I'm interested in as well, what's made you be able to have those clear perspectives, because you've had a lot of things go on in your life, and there's any number of things that you could say, well, is it being in a war zone? But I'm interested in the fact that, when you were younger, I don't know what your dream was of what you wanted to become when you were a young boy, but is there a point where you realized that you could just flip the switch on perspective and start seeing these things, because the stuff you talk about is amazing, but it's really hard to get it to for people to understand how you actually can do that.
It's a muscle. I will say, I actually got interviewed by a 17-year-old right before this, one of my very successful entrepreneur friends going to college, and she asked me questions about entrepreneurship, and it challenged me, because even she has a very different perspective than most of the people I talk to. And she's like, well, how important are visions? And I was like, well, it's so interesting, Savannah. At 40 years old, I feel like for the first time in my entire career, I have clarity on what I want my future to look like. Everything else has been jumping into the deep end of every pool to see if I liked it or not liked it, which is the only way to change perspective. It's experience, right? And you nailed this earlier. When somebody freezes, it eliminates their ability to get clarity or get perspective because they take no action. And somehow people have fallen into this trap that stagnation exists, but it does not. It's either growth or death. Like when you pause and freeze, you're not moving forward or standing still, you're moving backwards, because the time doesn't continue to stop. It keeps going over and over and over. But the only reason I have this perspective is, like, even as an entrepreneur, I've changed my businesses probably 100 times in a year. Like, I went from marine to food blogger to cookbook author to web designer to social media marketer, affiliate marketer, paid media, made an app, built 1 million fans, deleted them, got off the internet for 3 years, figured out I could be a consultant, consulted 150 different companies before I even had a model. And I was like, I'll figure it out with you. Then acquired companies, built companies, lost them, sold some, acquired more. And like, I feel like right now, I'm like, I think I know what I want to do for the rest of my life, and I'm 40 years old. But I think people have also fallen into this trap that, like, the first thing I choose is the thing I have to do forever. And that's death for me. Because the number one secret is being aligned and passionate about what you do and realizing that no one's coming to change the game for you. Like, the fork didn't make me fat. I made me fat. Right? Like, nobody forced me to eat the food and be 100 pounds heavier or 50 kilos heavier 2 years ago. I did that. And then when I decided I didn't want to be fat anymore, I also couldn't wake up and be like, I'm unfat, and 50 kilos drops off my body. I had to start changing things and trying things to see what worked and what didn't work. And the more reps we get, the more experience we get, the more practice and the more results we get, but also the more aware you get of everything happening. And so, yeah, my perspective's really easy because, like, I don't know about you, but I put the wrong link in a Facebook ad at scale and I lost 43 grand in 19 minutes because the link was broken. And I'll never do that again. But I don't know how to teach that to somebody. And I'm like, but I'm trying to save you. So maybe, like, slow down your nervous system, think things through, don't react, but also don't eliminate the game. Like, this game is a series of roadblocks and flat tires. And what I have found is that when somebody gets a flat tire, instead of just changing it, they slash the other 3 and wonder why they're not getting results. You're guaranteed to hit roadblocks. Like, even the definition of marketing, when I give it to people, I'm like, marketing is guessing and testing until a test works, knowing you better have 3 guesses because it's about to break. That's marketing, right? And Parkinson's law is beautiful, but when we think about the social media thing, when you start as an entrepreneur, your first 1,000 posts never get likes or comments, but you don't have the time to look at them because you have to go make another one and go make another one. It's only when we fall in the trap that we made it that we lose the game. But the results we get are a trailing byproduct of the intentionality and integrity of our inputs. And all too often we stop putting the inputs in, and by the time we realize it, we're living in the pain of those inputs. And so the more success you have, the more deeply committed you have to be to your practices and those inputs, because delayed gratification is the only way you get a result in the first place. And so it really comes down to training your nervous system to play the game. And entrepreneurship, the rules are really, really clear, but you can't agree to play the game and then try to change the rules of the game once you're playing it. You agreed to these rules, so you better learn to love them. Facebook's not going to be here forever. Instagram's going to change. A new social media platform's going to come up. But also 25 years ago, we didn't have access to get millions of people to follow us for free. And now you're complaining they're not showing your content to everybody? Great. Try to get the same reach with billboards or paid advertising in print magazines and you're going to go out of business. Like, it's a gift that you even have access to it. But any moment you choose to think that you're a victim of the rules of the game that you're playing, you've already lost the game. Because no matter what, you're still the person who has to operate on that field. And I just feel like people hold themselves back. Like, they're like, oh, I want to be a runner. So they'll go read books on running for 6 months. And I'm like, but if you just go for a 10-minute run every day, you're going to be a way better runner than you would ever be by reading those books, and you're going to know a whole lot more. And I think the thing that I realize is that we've lost that art of experience. Like, there's not pride in the process anymore. It's like, I want it now. I want it instantly. But when was the last time you celebrated anything in your life or remembered anything in your life that came easy? Never. It has no perspective. It has no purpose. And I even read this quote to my alliance earlier because I was talking to them about grief. I was talking to them about feelings, right? And I was like, we also think that numb is the end state in life. Like, we're like, oh, I want it easy. And my 7-year-old teaches this. Like, he just walked in the room and I waved to him, but he's so used to having entrepreneurs in the house. He listens to everything, and he'll hear an entrepreneur at my dinner table. And I'm like, yeah, but I just want it easy. Like, I just want it to be predictable. And he'll walk over, he'll grab a piece of paper, and he'll draw a straight line on the paper. And he's like, what is this? And they're like, it's flat. And he's like, if this was your heartbeat, what would it mean? And they're like, it would mean that I'm dead. And he's like, okay. And then he'll draw a heartbeat. And he'd be like, if this was your heartbeat, what would it mean? And he's like, they'd be like, well, that I'm alive. And he's like, kind of like your emotions. Your emotions are going to come up and come down, but you have to feel them all to be alive. And that's my 7-year-old. And I'm like, he nailed it, right?
Absolutely.
And we get into this point where we just don't want to feel, but feeling is the greatest human experience. Like, I'm a man of faith. Not once does the Bible promise happiness. It's not mentioned once. Right? Our whole job is to be useful and to embrace the suffering in this world, to bring light and love to people. And I read this quote to people earlier, and it said, grief is what alchemizes our pain and turns it into a seed and plants that seed into fertile ground so that we can create new life. And if you go read Joseph Campbell, The Hero's Journey, everybody thinks you end when you slay the dragon, but you missed a step. Once you slay the dragon, the next step is to return to the village to teach them what you know, and then the new dragon appears. There is no finish line. And Tucker Max, who's a dear friend of mine, incredible author, one of only 3 authors to have 3 books on the New York Times simultaneously, drew this out on a whiteboard for me. And he's like, okay, so you're going to climb this mountain. I'm like, yep. And he's like, and then you get to the top of that peak and you realize there's another one over there. I'm like, yep. And he's like, have you realized that you can't jump from one to the other? You missed the point where you have to come down the backside of the other one before you can climb the next one. Right? And so, like, there's all these things where people are committed to negating the most beautiful parts of the journey. And that's where growth happens. That's where life happens. But you can't remove yourself from it and expect the results. If you go to the gym and you lift weights every day and you don't feel it, you're not going to keep going back because your muscles aren't getting stronger. So somehow when it's sore and it hurts at the gym, you're like, yeah, I'm getting stronger. And then all of a sudden there's any resistance in your life or business. And you're like, nope, I can't feel that. And we wonder why we get weaker. It's the same muscle, but it's a muscle that has to be practiced. And you have to love the process.
You absolutely do have to love the process. I mean, I think it's a difficult journey being an entrepreneur. And
oh my God, yes, we're crazy.
And I love the idea of the following the passions and how they've changed for you. And it's from my perspective, it's actually come full circle, because I started my career in radio and absolutely loved that. And then lots of things led me down a path of entrepreneurship, and I've forever wanted to come back to radio, but there's limited opportunities, particularly in Australia in talkback radio. And here I am doing exactly what I want to be doing, interviewing, amazing guests as part of, my business. And being able to continue to do that is just huge. And I think that's when you've got that passion, it's a game changer. And it's interesting about that, the focus you had. And I love the example of the runner, because the interesting thing that I see is that a lot of people that put themselves in that bracket and start going running get distracted by the fact, I have to learn how to make the sneakers. and it's not about that. And I think it's choosing your own laneway and knowing what you can do and what you need to focus on. And I love how you are focused on relationships and business relationships in particular. We've got to wrap things up in a minute, but I just wanted to ask you about that firstly. What is the
and we can do round 2 if you want. I'll do this with you all day. This is
I mean, we could talk for hours, and I know that. So tell me about the relationships with business leaders. What is it? I know you teach about what you should be doing, and I don't want to take away from the fact that people can go and check out your stuff, and they can hire you, they can listen to your podcast. But I'm interested in what is it that when it comes to that, what is it that people are getting really wrong? What is it that they're losing that perspective?
Yeah, I'm going to answer this interesting. And so, first, the reason I have my podcast is I give away all this for free. My job is to help people, not to convince you to pay me, right? I want you to want me, not need me. So I give away it all for free. And so it's all uncovered. But I think the why of this is really, really important. And I can even do it through the lens of transaction. Every single human decision that's ever made is an emotional-based decision. Every one of them. Who you choose to follow, who you choose to listen to, who you choose to go to dinner with, who you choose to buy from. And for a human being to make an emotional-based decision, there's one feeling that they have to feel, which is safe. And the only way for someone to feel safe is to feel seen, heard, loved, or respected. And that requires a relationship. And to think that anything can happen without that is just delaying the inevitable pain, and it's causing pain on both sides. And the only reason I teach what I teach is because coming up in my life, growing in trauma, being homeless, going to war, is I bled all over people for other people who cut me, and they didn't cut me. And I caused a lot of pain, and I caused a lot of irreparable damage to people through business and through how I treated them. And I was saved and forgiven and came home, but also realized that the biggest thing that's missing in this world is connection. That's the thing that keeps getting driven apart. And if we go back in business 50 years, the only reason it ever worked were how people felt and relationships. And we think that the internet was a different ecosystem when it actually just speeds up the process of relationships. And to think it's anything else is really a mistake, in my opinion. And I say this to people, I'm like, what is your success of a marriage working if the moment she comes home after your wedding night that you automate your relationship to text messages and emails and expect it to work? It would never work. So why would you expect it to work on my family or giving them a credit card or a business relationship? You can't rob people of the things that are required for them to make a decision in the first place and ever expect it to work. And so the mistake is thinking there's any other way. But whether somebody invests $1, $10, or even their time, the only reason they would is because they feel safe and seen. And everything else is just trying to convince and manipulate people that work. So I just feel like it's a lose-lose game. And it just leads to a dead end where both sides feel soulless and unhappy. And I've been blessed to learn that through the wrong reasons, but I've also been blessed to benefit from it for all the right reasons. Because at the end of the day, my job is not to get your credit card. My job is to get you one step closer to your goals. And if you decide you want more of that, I'm here to help, but you didn't need me in the first place. And I think when we forget that, we lose the game because we also take agency away from both sides. And so for me, the biggest mistake that people make is thinking that people don't matter. Because when you think about business, when we think about how people are treated, how they're closed in deals, how they're sold things, the first thing I ask people when I keynote is I'm like, would you be okay if your grandmother went through your own funnel? And they're like, no. And I'm like, then why can mine go through it and it's okay? If I put yours through mine, you might attack me if it looked like yours. And so why do we think that's okay? And so there's this part where we can't ever forget what matters, because here's the other perspective. I've been to war. I've seen the darkest parts of humanity. And right now, if some catastrophic event happened, and power went out, and resources went out, and the world went into a negative state, the only thing that you have is the relationships and how you treated people. And without them, you have nothing. And so to think that you have them now because things look great is just a lose-lose game. And I don't think we can ever lose sight of that, because I've been around enough businesses and I've been in the boardrooms of all these billionaires, and I will tell you, there's two people. There's the people who built their success on the backs of others, and they're soulless and empty, and no matter what, it's never enough. And there's people who built their businesses with people next to them and took care of them, and they feel fulfilled and happy. Because money's not real. This stuff's not real. It's just a construct. And I promise you, go watch interviews with people that are 80, 90 on their deathbed. The one thing they'll always say is, I wish I worked less and spent more time with people. I've just experienced enough death and been close enough to it enough that I'm not willing to lose that anymore. And I got 50 more years to enjoy every ounce of it. And it just so happens to be the quote unquote best strategy and tactic that exists.
I love all of that. And I want to ask you one final question for this episode, because we're definitely going to do this again. And I am totally lucky enough to be being part of a couple of sessions that you've got coming up in the next month. So I'm going to look forward to talking to you after that, because I'm going to be interested in what my perspective is after I hear all of those things. But I this is the one question, and I don't know whether you can answer this or not. But you've got so many insights, and I know in the session that I sat in with you on, which was about a 90-minute session, and I think I almost ran out of ink. I was writing that many things down in the paper, and is there a moment that you can remember when that perspective changed and your ability to be able to flip the switch and be able to take all of these things and really put that knowledge down and be able to share it? Is there a moment when you realized when that was your superpower, to be able to do that?
Yeah, there was a moment. There was a very, very big moment, but it wasn't for everybody else. It was for me. And I do remember vividly, because I was an addict. I had a lot of dark wounds in my life. And I was an opiate addict. I was bulimic for 15 years because of abuse as a child. And I compensated, and entrepreneurship became my new addiction. And I remember this moment like it was yesterday. And it was my ex-wife, who's still my best friend, and we live together still. And I was on a New York Times bestselling book tour, and I was about to give a keynote. And I was going to give a keynote on how you could use food to create breakthrough results in your life. And in true wife fashion, as she should have, she looked me dead in the eyes and said, "Are you really going to go?" Still bulimic, and I'm literally on a New York Times best-selling cookbook tour to teach you how to be healthy and love your body. And I had every panic attack you could imagine. I was literally wearing, go up there and lie to them again. And I knew exactly what she meant. I knew exactly what she meant, because I had just purged in the bathroom because I was still bulimic. And I'm literally on a New York Times best-selling cookbook tour to teach you how to be healthy and love your body. And I had every panic attack you could imagine. I was literally wearing a blue and white shirt, and by the time I walked out on stage, it was drenched in sweat. Like, I looked like I was having, I don't know, like withdrawals from drugs and everything you can imagine. And I faced every fear I'd ever had. I'm like, if I'm honest with these people, I'm going to commit career suicide. I'm never going to be in business again. No one's ever going to talk to me. And so I walk out to this audience. There's like 500 people. There's people on their phone. There's people standing up. And I was like, this is my choice. Like, I either get to live in prison for the rest of my life and be soulless, or I get to be honest with myself. And I remember this like it was yesterday. I stood up there and I said, "I'm sorry. I've been lying to all of you." And everybody that was on their phone looked up, and everybody that was standing up looked at me, and I was like, "Yep, here it goes, career suicide." And I said, the reason I did this and wrote this book is because the easiest place to hide my addiction was in plain sight. And I've been lying to all of you, and I just purged in the bathroom. And everybody that was standing up sat down, and everybody that was on their phone put it away. And I basically just divulged like a confessional for about 10 minutes. And I basically said everything that I had ever hidden from anybody. Like, I did a radical honesty, like, here's it all. And every fear that I had zero evidence and never came true. And I finished that whole 10-minute dialogue, and then I just sat there in silence, and I didn't know what to do. I was like just standing on stage frozen, and someone's like, "Well, you're going to give us your talk?" And I was like, yeah, and I gave the talk. And after that talk, every single person came up to me and thanked me. They thanked me for being honest. They thanked me for being authentic. They thanked me for cleaning it up. And I realized that the only prison I created was my own. And the only way to win in this world is to be radically honest and authentic with who you are. And since that day, my truth is my sobriety. And so I share however I feel, whenever I feel it. If I cry, I cry. If I feel nauseous, I tell people. If I say something and I'm like, wait, I feel like that was just for my ego, I clean it up. And I realize that that's freedom. Freedom is radical expression of your truth in every moment. And it just so happens that they just did a study on this called the Spain study, SPANE. And they figured out that authenticity was 4,000 times more resonant as a frequency than love. And that's why, because it's truly, truly you being aligned in who you are. And it was in that moment that I realized that my job wasn't to speak. My job was just to just tell my story and answer with what comes up in my heart. And from that day on, I never stopped. And sometimes it feels raw. Sometimes it feels easy. But I feel like my job is to be myself. And through a lot of practice, and I've done over 15,000 podcasts now in 14 years. And I mean, like, it's a lot. And I've recorded over 1 million videos. Like, we can tangibly see all of this, but I've never prepared for one. I've never written one. I just genuinely speak from my heart. And it feels like anything less is a prison to me. And so that moment was the moment where every fear I had went away, and I was no longer ashamed to be myself or to say that I stumble, and to know that I sin every day, and to know that I make mistakes, and none of this is perfect. I'm just figuring it out just like everybody else is. But that's what freedom feels like. And I feel like I'm being the example for my children, that they get to be authentic and love themselves for who they are. And it was that moment. And then I don't think I truly believed that my story could impact people. And I can measurably say, even with my food blog alone, I touched and reached over 1 billion unique people. It wasn't enough. It wasn't enough. It wasn't enough. And then it was when I truly, truly accepted myself and realized, like, wow, like, no, I do love myself for all of this. Like, I made a lot of mistakes, but I learned and I got better and I grew. And that's the whole point. Like, we're just kids trying to figure it all out. And for me, the only thing I measure my day on is if I can put my head on the pillow and be like, you know what? I was in integrity today. Like, I gave it my all, whatever I had to give. And since that day, I haven't stopped. And so I radically consume. I put myself in hard situations. I jump into the deep end of the hardest situations. And I'm like, we'll figure it out. And then the moment I learn, I share it with people. And I'm like, if this can help you, great. And if not, it's just for me. And that just feels like, I don't know, freedom to me.
I love that. You know, the authenticity of that, and thank you for sharing with me,
Thanks
with the
for asking.
audience. It really is appreciated, because the realness is what separates us. Our own experiences is what is our story and what makes us be able to give to other people. And you have an incredible way of giving insights, and I know audiences appreciate it. I know my audience will appreciate it. I certainly do. It's why I love podcasting, because it's truly authentic in a world of AI. That can write books and do all sorts of things. This conversation is real. And, I had a gazillion notes written down here, and I can tell you, other than the first line of the introduction, I don't read a single one of them, because
Yep.
it's really about having a real conversation with someone. And I thank you for giving me all of your time today. The last thing I wanted to do before you go, because we laughed about this before you started, but you have to get your bobblehead in here. And
Oh my God, yes, totally.
I love this. As we said before the show, if you've got your own bobblehead, you know you've made it totally. So
I know. This thing is great.
So tell me, what's the bobblehead going to say to you today about what you got to do for the next few days?
Oh yeah. You know what's so funny is the bobblehead, and it reminds me to be joyful and to play and never forget it. And that was the biggest breakthrough I had last weekend when I was out in nature with men, is that I can only experience as much joy as I also experience my emotions and authenticity, but it's something that I've robbed myself of. And I fall into the trap of taking everything too seriously. And so I was like, the moment work is done, Whatever my 7-year-old says, we're doing. If he wants to go play tag with mommy, if he wants to go run outside, if he wants to go jump in puddles, we're doing it. And I think the more we all remember to play and not take life so seriously, the bigger we all win the game, because it's really, time is precious, and I don't know when I'm not going to wake up again. And I don't ever want to be there and wonder if I gave it my all. And that means in every area: play, love, connection, these conversations. Like, I crave these. This is why I do what I do, because people are all that matters. And I will say, I finally feel like I made it. It took me 40 years, and somebody gifted me this bobblehead, and it is like the best gift I've ever been sent. And I keep it on my desk, and I literally just laugh at it. And I was like, God, that really is what I look like. I'll work on that. But yeah, I'm proud of it. I love it. And it just reminds me to not take myself so seriously, because most of the time, this is what I feel like when people interview me. I'm just like, whoa, I hope this is valuable for you, but this is really my medicine. And so I also want to thank you for having me, and for everybody listening. Like, time is the one gift that I can never give back to you. And so for you to choose to share it with me and have me, like, it's a genuine honor. Like, it really, really is. And for everybody listening, like, it's an honor, and it's something I don't take lightly. And so from the bottom of my heart, like, just the utmost gratitude for even listening and for you having me on the show.
It's been an absolute pleasure. We will obviously include all the details of how to get in touch with you in the show notes, but particularly mindofgeorge.com and Instagram, it's George Bryant. They're the two best places to follow you. And of course, the podcast, that all those information is on the website. So we'll include that as well.
And it's the pinkest website you'll ever see. Just so everybody knows, it is the pinkest website you will ever see. My website is pink, and pink. It's my favorite color. So just go look for the pink. It's beautiful.
I love it. I just got to tell you this very quickly as we finish up, that I worked on a branding exercise many years ago with an organization. And we went through all of the things, all the bits and pieces that we do, all the research and everything. We came up with this really exciting brand, and everyone loved it. And it was rolled out everywhere. But there was one manager who decided, doesn't matter what, everything's going to be in hot pink, regardless. So I said, but we've done all the research. This is not what the research says. No, it's in hot pink. So there it was, no matter what. So I have total respect for you for putting it out there.
It's my favorite color. Like, genuinely, it's my favorite color. And everybody always wants to know why the pink. I'll have to tell you on the next show, and I'll just open that loop for everybody. And that's called the Zygarnik effect. You can Google it. It's the science of open loops, but I'll leave everybody with that one, because there is a good story.
Fantastic. Well, George, again, thank you so much for being a wonderful guest on Biz Bites. I really appreciate it. And I'm looking forward to being part of your conversations in the coming month. And we're going to catch up again after that and do this all again. Biz Bites is brought to you by Com Together for all your marketing needs, so you can build your brand, engage audiences on multiple platforms. Go to comtogether.com.au, follow the links to book an appointment for a free consultation.